love the game. If I don't stop playing it, my wife is going to kill me.
You're in this dark, nasty place? Pretty disgusting.
Now on 32X.
It makes me sweat.
Welcome to the world of Doom. A hellish nightmare for the more real, the more intense world of Genesis 32X.
It takes my mind off work.
Just one of the astounding new games for the machine 6 times more powerful than 3DO.
Back up!
Gotta give him credit, that was a decent commercial. But I'm afraid we ain't seen nothing when it comes to video game commercials yet. Trust me, they get better from here. So let's get down to the actual port. So, Doom was ported to basically everything that could run it at the time, or couldn't run it in some cases. Some of these are absolutely amazing, some of these absolutely suck. The first port we're talking about, as you saw from the commercial, is the 32X Doom. Now, as far as console ports go, they rarely were as good as their PC counterparts, as the gap between PC and console was massive, even in the 90s. But we're going to give you a quick overview of what the heck 32X even is. So, Sega wanted a cheap add-on for their Genesis that allowed them to make 32-bit games cheaper. It was supposed to be a stand-in for the Sega Saturn, and to be honest with you, it went horribly. It went very, very horribly. Now, we'll all go over the 32X someday, but today we're talking about Doom, so we're sticking on the topic. Doom was one of the launch titles, and it was the first console port, and let me tell you, that's not a good thing in this situation. This game needed more time in the oven to be made. Even the senior producer of Sega of America said, and I quote, "I spent weeks working with id Software's John Carmack, who literally camped out at the Sega of America building in Redwood City trying to get Doom ported. The guy worked his ass off and still had to cut a third of the levels to get it done in time." What amazes me now is that with all that was going on, nobody at Sega was willing to say, "Wait a minute, what are we doing? Why don't we just stop?" Sega should have killed the 32X in the spring of 1994, but we didn't. We stormed the hill, and when we got to the top, we realized it was the wrong damn hill. Scott Bayless, senior producer at Sega of America. Even the executives knew this was going to be a bad idea, but they did it anyway. Classic rich idiots. Alright, so let's be fair to 32X port. It's not the most offensive entry in Doom's sprawling legacy of ports at this time. Actually, it's not that bad. Let me break it down for you. So, for starters, you're missing a lot of levels. There's only 15 here, plus 2 hidden bonus levels, out of the original 27 that were in the original PC game. The BFG, aka the big fucking gun, yeah, you're not going to stumble across it in levels. You got to use a cheat code if you want to get it. And as for weapons, as soon as you get the chainsaw, it replaces your fists. But honestly, who wants to go bare-knuckle boxing with demons when you have a chainsaw? Still, I thought it was worth mentioning. And the maps have been simplified from their PC counterparts. But the gameplay is surprisingly solid. It runs decently, even with the reduced screen size. Honestly, the reduced screen size was probably done in order to keep the performance up, which makes sense. Also, the mechanics hold up pretty well for 32X Doom. It uses a 6-button Sega Genesis controller, and there's no circle strafing, but that's the only thing that's really missing here. And the controls are responsive and everything, so works good. It also doesn't have near the level of dynamic lighting effects that the PC version had, but it's running on much weaker hardware, so they had to make some concessions somewhere. There is, however, some glaring issues that just can't be ignored. So our first major issue is there's no save function on the 32X. There's level select, but if you beat the game without going from the very beginning all the way to the end, you won't get the true ending. Sorry. And the music. It is horrendous. Just listen to this garbage. I would like to point out that someone was paid to make this. Then someone was paid to oversee it, and ship it, and approve it. This would be unacceptable in my studio under any circumstance. However, my friends, you are in luck. Because me, my music producer, we're gonna make some actual good tunes for this game. This is Jared Laws, or anthon, my music producer. And it's gonna be an absolute piece of cake for him to remake the soundtrack. As well as me, of course. Jared, take it away. Unfortunately, I couldn't track down any reviews for the time to see how well it was received when it came out. However, I consider it a pretty okay port, especially seeing the console and the time it came out. Is it worth playing today? Well, you're missing a ton of levels, 2 boss fights, and can't even access one of the main weapons without a cheat code, and the music sounds like garbage, so I'm gonna say no. Well, unless you slap on our music on top of it. In that case, the music's gonna be pretty decent. But you can get this game on Steam pretty cheap, so I would highly recommend just doing that and not bothering with the 32X version unless you just have a morbid curiosity or just like the 32X. However, for our next Doom port, we're going to church.
And I say to you, my brothers and sisters, hell is a deep, dark, foul-smelling prison of the damned. Filled with fire and brimstone, lost souls and demons. And how do you escape this eternal damnation? You blast the nasty demons right between their beady little eyes.
Doom for the 64-bit Jaguar. The best Doom ever.
I gotta say, I have no idea where that church sermon came from, but if they're preaching about hell in this context, sign me up for Sunday school. Because this is gonna be one awesome church sermon. So what is an Atari Jaguar, you ask? Well, do the math. I'm just kidding. The Jaguar was Atari's last console and was the first 64-bit console to hit the market. I'm not going to get too much detail about it, but all you need to know is it failed due to lackluster library of games, and which is a shame too, because I feel like if this console had a better library of games, it could have probably competed with the next generation of consoles like the PlayStation and Nintendo 64. So unlike the 32X version, the Jaguar port of Doom was actually developed in-house by Legends at id Software. Yup, this bad boy was their first crack at porting Doom to other systems. Though the 32X version got shoved out the door first because, you know, the 32X needed a launch title. However, this one got much, but they managed to fit in 22 of the original 27 levels. Not bad for a port of this era. That said, the levels that did make the cut weren't untouched. They got the old simplified due to the console limitations treatment. I think primarily it's going to be due to memory constraints, but I can't say for sure. This version also became the blueprint for pretty much every other port that followed, including 3DO, Game Boy Advance, and 32X. Yes, even the 32X version, despite being rushed out the door quickly, used this as a basis. So the frame rate in this version is pretty solid, and the controls are pretty good, I guess. It has a really quirky controller, the Jaguar. It looks like a science fiction calculator got fused with a Sega Genesis controller, I guess. Each of these bazillion buttons here allows you to swap weapons instantly, so no need to cycle through them like it's a game of Duck Duck Goose. Unlike the other versions, which only has 2 buttons for cycling, and you have to cycle through this whole wheel, and it takes a while to find the weapon you're looking for. In this version, just pick the button that's assigned to that weapon, and there you go. Also, you can save your progress in this version automatically, making it instantly better than the 32X version. Look, it's a low bar, I know, but you gotta start somewhere. Now, before you get too excited, it's not quite the PC version save system. You can't save mid-level, but your progress between levels is saved, and you can replay any level you've unlocked straight from the menu. Plus, while you're still missing 2 bosses, all the weapons are here, which is a sweet deal. Overall, I think this makes it one of the better games on the Jaguar, just like Doom was the bright spot in the 32X's lineup. But there is some cons to this package. Here's the thing about the music, or well, the lack of it. The Jaguar version of Doom is the only console port that doesn't play music during its gameplay. Let me explain why. The Jaguar has this little chip called a Digital Signal Processor, or DSP for short. Think of it like the console's multitasking brain. It handles stuff like mathematical tasks. Collision detection's a good example, and an important example in this case. What's collision detection, you ask? Well, it's a thing that makes sure you don't walk through walls or get stuck in a door. Got it? Good. Now, the DSP was already working overtime running Doom's gameplay. So it literally didn't have the power to make music play at the same time. So the developers had to make a tough call. Either keep the game running smoothly, or throw in music. They chose gameplay. Probably a wise move, as we'll find out later, nobody wants Doom to run like a slideshow. That said, there's not 100% a lack of music. There are title and intermission screens that feature music. And these intermission tracks are actually remixed pieces from the PC version. Now, I have my own theory as to why this is. I'm thinking they remixed these tracks during development with the intention for them to play during the game. However, they found out later on that they didn't have the power to actually make the music play in game without making the game run like crap. So they just stuck them on the intermission screens because why not? We have them. Look, it's a solid port, but in all honesty, who's going to be playing the Jaguar version of Doom today? Much like the 32X, there isn't really much to say here for me. You're better off playing the PC version on Steam, unless you just have memories of this version. And even then, you can probably still emulate it. Granted, emulating this wacky controller is a real pain. Also, you gotta find a Jaguar emulator that actually functions properly. And you need to know how to make it function properly. Yeah, Jaguar emulation is a mess. I wish I had more to say about it, but that's it. I don't. So I guess it's time to move on to the next port, which is honestly far more interesting in my opinion.
Everyone's gone but me. Am I alone? Or am I dead? I hate this place.
Well, here we have it. The very first example of someone asking that I can find, can it run Doom? Randy Linden, the sole programmer behind Doom's Super Nintendo port, was a passionate game developer who set out on this ambitious journey, largely because he just wanted to. Look, we're game designers, we do cool stuff all the time. At the time, Doom's source code had not been released yet, so Linden resourcefully turned to the unofficial Doom specs to meticulously understand the game's layout. From there, he extracted the resources from the IWAD file. However, certain assets like the player sprites and the original status bar face sprites remain unused due to the technical limitations of the Super FX chip. Now let's talk ingenuity. Due to the lack of official development tools for the Super FX chip, Linden innovated by creating his own set of tools, assembler, linker, debugger, collectively called Access. And get this, to set these up on his trusty Amiga computer, he connected it to a modified Super Nintendo cartridge of Star Fox and controllers using a custom protocol. This Frankenstein-style setup demonstrated the true hacker spirit this man had when making this port. Okay, so I'm probably confusing some people here when I'm talking about this Super FX chip. Let me explain what it was. The Super FX chip was a special processor built into certain Super Nintendo games to give the console extra power for handling 3D graphics and other complex effects. Think of it as giving the Super Nintendo a booster to perform tasks it couldn't do on its own, like rendering 3D objects in games. It, however, also boosted the price tag, because games that used it were more expensive because the chip was physically built into every single cartridge. A good example I can think of is it's like buying an extra processor for your computer to play more powerful games. However, you were having to do this for every single game that used the Super FX chip. Some notable examples of games that use the Super FX chip include Star Fox, Stunt Race FX, and Yoshi's Island. These titles stood out for their unique visuals and pushing the Super Nintendo beyond the limits of its thought capabilities. Well, technically did push the limits past Super Nintendo's capabilities because you were having to bring an extra processor in here to make it go to those extra capabilities. Sorry, game designer rant. Let's get back to Doom on Super Nintendo. After crafting a working prototype, Linden shared it with Sculptured Software. They helped bring the port to completion, though compromises had to be made. While Linden wished he could have included missing levels, the game's 16 megabit cartridge was maxed out, leaving literally 16 bytes of free space. Yet his creativity persisted. Support was added for the Super Scope light gun and Super NES mouse, and even the X-band modem for multiplayer. Yes, I kid you not. This is a Super Nintendo game that if you have one of these things, you could play online multiplayer. Too bad I don't have one of these things so I can show you guys, but it's still neat. And here's a surprising twist. The port was developed in secret. Sculpt Software presented it to id Software as a finished product, and John Romero himself recalled id's thrilling reaction. Oh hell yeah! So, how does the game hold up as a port? Let's take a look. So, let's see how well Randy did with Doom on the Super Nintendo. So for starters, it's very pixelated and the screen size has been reduced, much like the 32X version. One strength this version brings to the table, however, is its levels more closely resemble the original DOS version, unlike most other ports that were based on the Jaguar version. The controls are simple, functional, and responsive. with dedicated buttons for switching weapons, shooting, running, and strafing, and opening doors. So far, so good. However, the draw distance is very much to be desired. Anything more than just a few pixels away is a blurry mess. So the rule of thumb is, if you see something in the distance, shoot it first and ask questions later. So the chainsaw made the cut, as well as the BFG, though the chainsaw sounds less like Texas Chainsaw Massacre like it did in the DOS version, and more like Angry Electronic Toothbrush. Still, it hacks demons up like it always did. You even get the 2 bosses, which is a win in my book. There's even an episode select, though it has some quirks. If you're playing on I'm Too Young to Die or Hey Not Too Rough, you can only select episode 1. You can only select episode 2 if you're at a difficulty above Hurt Me Plenty. However, if you're wanting to play episode 3, you'll need to crank it up to Ultra Violent or Nightmare. So, yeah, that's a thing. Now let's address the elephant in the room, the difficulty. There's no circle strafing, so you're basically cannon fodder. Plus, with the draw distance, enemies will happily snipe you out of sight. So you'll be flailing around like a headless chicken wielding a chain gun trying to figure out where they're at. And don't even get me started on the enemy sprites themselves. Every demon is locked in a permanent, hyper-aggressive staring contest with you. Because there's no back sprites, meaning they're always facing you, always ready to attack you. So now we get to the music, and it's actually pretty good. It easily outdoes the Jaguar, because there was none, and 32X, well, you can only go up from there. But honestly, even taking those 2 out of the equation, I think this makes a pretty good rendition of the Doom soundtrack. Take a listen. So as you can see, the music's pretty good, but I have one more complaint about this version of Doom, and that it has no save function or individual level select. Meaning, if you want to pick up where you left off, you're stuck using the episode select, or the save state on an emulator, which I'm pretty sure if anyone plays this game today, it's exactly how they're going to do it. But still, playing on real hardware, this game would be a nightmare. Seriously, if I was in Randy Linden's shoes when developing this port, I would have considered cutting out a level or two to make room for a save system or a password system of sorts. It would have made this version a lot more player-friendly and enjoyable. So is this version worth playing today? Unless you're curious, the answer is a resounding no. Unless you're just that weird person who likes seeing Doom running severely underpowered hardware, don't even bother. Just get the PC version that has Doom 1, Doom 2, and all the bonus episodes and expansions for like $4 on Steam. But here's a fun fact before I wrap up this video, is that Randy Linden, the genius behind this port, he also created Bleem, the very first emulator. It was for the PlayStation, and it lets you play PlayStation games on your computer. Though, that's going to be a video for another time. Figured I'd just let you guys know that the guy who made this port also invented emulation. So with these 3 ports out of the way, this video is getting ridiculously long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this part 1 of my Doom ports. And then the next video, I'm going to cover the rest of them in part 2. So make sure you stick around for that, because trust me, there are some interesting ports coming out. Also, if you like the music that was featured in this episode, check out anthon's Spotify page. Links are in the description. He's the music producer for Centurion Dragon Studios, and let's just say he does a really good job. Anyway, can't wait to talk to you guys in the next episode. It's going to be amazing. Troy Schultz, out.